think it is possible to bring in all the players that meet your leadership way. I don't think that's possible. I go back to what Buffett said. I don't know, it was a couple of weeks ago where he talked about physical, tactical, psychological, and technical. Like when you're grading those things, okay, and you're bringing players in, you know where they stand on these parts, and then the leader has to adapt to a guy that is a 30 makeup, like and show him that he needs how to be professional or things like that. This guy's got a 60 makeup. I can let him go and let him be a little bit more free. I don't think you can know every person when you're recruiting. You talk to them once a week. They give you what you want to know. They tell you what you want to hear. You don't really truly know someone until you spend actual time with them, sit down. That's my personal opinion on it.
I wrote that it's a lot easier to get a coach who will adapt to your players than a bunch of players who are going to adapt to your coach right off the bat. But with that being said, I do think you have to have like a base level of buy-in of some respect for the coach and some acknowledgement that you're going to try to listen to him.
I just don't believe that you're a leader if you don't have the ability to reach everybody.
Good leaders definitely adapt.
Yeah, they have the ability to reach all of their.
Like watch Phil Jackson with the Bulls. I mean, he had the toughest job in sports, managing the best athlete ever, while also managing Dennis Rodman. And then Scottie Pippen was angry at the front office. Like, then how they acted in practice. Like, the guy just adapted. No surprise, he's the best ever. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think to kind of go off of what you guys are saying, having like a system in place seems to be what most elite franchises do. Whether it's the Patriots or the All Blacks or whatever it is, that the legendary franchises seem to have systems that are put in place. But I'm with Bradley in that it comes down to like individual communication. And I don't think like the examples of contextual leadership in the article were broad. They were President Trump, they were Steve Jobs, and communicating across an entire organization in a specific way. But I think that, at least what I wrote down in my answer, was the article kind of insinuates that everyone in that organization, or everyone they were communicating to, required the same communication method. And I don't think that's always going to be the case. I know it's not going to be the case in our sport. And the example that I gave, I thought was a really good one, of our hitting coach at High A last year. He's like very, like he communicates very well with college guys, extremely well, because he uses very big words and he tries to be as intellectual as possible. And so really it takes a specific player to communicate well with him. But he had like a prospect that we were very high on last year at short. Is from Panama, and he's like very much of a head case. He's constant, like he'll quit easily. He doesn't like to work hard. He's very high anxiety. And so last year, what the city coach did to get through to him is he spent some time getting to know him, and then he asked him why he plays the game of baseball. And because he got to know him a little bit, this player opened up a little bit and basically said that he plays the game for his family back in Panama. So what he did is he printed out his family members' names on a Panamanian flag the size of an index card, and he gave it to the shortstop, and he said, it's like basically like a lineup card that he can put under his hat. He said, put it under your hat during the game. Every time you get anxious, anytime you get overwhelmed, I want you to take this out, even if it's on the field, look at the names, remember who you're playing for, and then get back in the game. And it worked. Like the kid did a much better job throughout the rest of the season. He was more stable. He was more receptive to coaching. And I thought that was a good example of, like, obviously the Astros have a system. Like, we have a set system of guys that are going to be successful when they come through. We have a set way that we want them to be coached. But then on an individual level, like communicating with these players, that's where I think real true like contextual leadership comes into play.
Great point.
That was a great example.
Going back to like the original question too, and I used Phil Jackson as an example, like managing different personalities. I think at the highest level of sports, like NBA, MLB, NHL, whatever, like as you build that mold, you need to know what your coach is capable of as a leader. And I think if you're a front office person, like you can't just load your team up with Dennis Rodmans, right? Like not going to win. But if you have a good mix of personalities, it allows your coach or your manager to like navigate his time, right? Like he knew he had to spend a little bit more time caring about Rodman, probably more than Pippen, right? And it can be in any scenario, right? Like use the Cardinals, right? Like we probably couldn't have an outfield of Dexter Fowlers. Like it just wouldn't work. We wouldn't win a lot of games because he doesn't have, like, you can have one of those guys, but you can't have half your roster like that. So I think it'd be cool to look at it from a front office viewpoint where you're trying to put together a roster that has to win games.
And then my last question is, how do you become like self-aware if you're not the leader your team needs to be, or if you're not doing something right? I mean, it's a very broad question, but.
I know on mine, well, the first thing is like you have to be willing to take criticism. If you can't take it, then you're clearly not willing to grow and you're not going to listen to anyone anyway. So like that's the core. In my opinion, is you have to be humble. That humility that we've talked about a lot. But I think one of the biggest things is having people around you that are willing to be honest with you and that you're honest with them as well. So like this group right here, obviously we don't work with each other day in and day out, but we communicate. And so like if I'm talking to Joey and for a week or a couple weeks I've been talking about this one player and I don't like him and I'm being like negative, being this and that, like he can be like, yo, why don't you take a step back? The last 2 weeks you haven't said one positive thing about the kid. Like why are you like, oh, I guess I'm just he bothered me, right? So that's because like we're all human. Like kids, these players are gonna piss us off at some point, but like having people around you that can be honest with you and be like, hey, you're not doing a very good job right now at what you need to do, and then being willing to take that in a positive way and move forward with that, I think is like you have to surround yourself with people that are, one, going to keep you accountable, and two, going to help you grow. That's my opinion.
Where my head went with this one was like you need to involve the people around you. And with the Orioles, we just finished Legacy is our book club read. And like my favorite quote from the book was, tell me and I'll forget, show me and I may remember, but involve me and I'll understand. And I think within the mold of the coach, traditionally, again, it's built up to be the authoritarian, like you're all obedient to me and you're just telling your players whatever. But really, like if you can involve your players in practice design, drill design, like you can involve them in how we go about attacking their player plan, involve them in, any type of meeting involving like game planning for the starter or whatever it is, like they're going to understand so much more. They're going to be able to eventually like grow out of you. Like you're not a good coach if that player needs you to be around in order for them to have success. And then likewise with the staff, like if you're never involving your staff in projects, like you're just telling them what to do, but you're not allowing them that creative freedom, then I don't think you're developing good contextual leadership, because one, like the system's only going to be as good as what you are. But then two, like you're not engaged with the other people around you. You're not you're not building up their skills. And I think we all know, like the more people you involve, the more perspectives you see, you start to realize like you could be doing things better. So that was where my head went, was just like the power of involvement.
I'll stem off that a little bit too. My answer is both like you two, like getting good people around you and involving them and trusting them. But one thing I wrote is like when you self-assess, don't be afraid to look at like your environment before you look at production. So some people might look at production to see if their leadership style is working. I think it's important, like, look at your environment, see if people enjoy it before you look at a stat line. Like Steve Kerr talks about it too, like when he got with the Warriors and they won their first championship, and they asked him, like, how are you going to keep them motivated to keep winning? And he talked about the environment, like little things like putting pictures on the wall of championships at their facility to how they communicate inside of practice. He never really touched on like an overall production scheme or practice design or what his game plan was going to be. And that always like stayed with me, because like when we play this game, it's 6 straight months. Like, you better like it or it's going to be really tough on you mentally, especially for your players.
I broke this down into 3 parts. The first part was reflection, self-reflection, and then reflection with your players. So whether it be, the 2+2 that we talked about, 2 things we did well today, 2 things we sucked at, or not sucked at, but we could do better. But reflection, not only personally, but with your entire group on the culture of what you're doing. The second is education. I taught Andy Haynes, the Milwaukee Brewers hitting coach, talk about this, but he studies millennials, he studies Generation Z. There are books on how these people are different than, like what Anthony was saying about, when I grew up, I just did what my coach said. And we coach different generations than we grew up in. So understanding those generations and educating yourself on that is super important, to be able to understand, like, whether you're getting through them to not, whether it's you or whether it's him or whether it's the environment, whatever it is. And the third one is experiences. Try to be a part of as many environments as possible. And so, like, as you go through, you've done college baseball, summer baseball, there's just different environments are going to teach you different parts of leadership. Like, I taught softball lessons for 8-10 years, and it was completely different environment than when I taught men. Like, just as the many environments you can be a part of. This one, for example, this is a different environment than I've ever been a part of. But it helps you understand different parts of leadership.
I think one thing to kind of go off Anthony too with our reading of Legacy is probably my favorite quote from the book was better people make better All Blacks. And so, like, in terms of like kind of like Joe was saying, how you evaluate yourself on your environment rather than necessarily the production, is like, are you making people better as people? Because they will get better at their job if you're making them better human beings. And I don't know where my head went with Bradley talking there about understanding generations and different people. Was like, you look at Bobby Knight, like, you can't say the guy wasn't a successful, like, winning basketball coach, but would he be the same coach that he was in today's game? Like, probably not. One, I guarantee the environment sucked, but like, that was a day and age where players just did what they were told, and if you got in or you got out. Like, if you didn't fit in, you're out, and a new guy was coming in. So it was like, eventually he's going to find guys that fit his system because he's running guys in and out, right? So like, it may have worked, but are the people becoming better? Is there a more efficient way to like reach people or make an organization better through contextual leadership? Probably. Is it a place where people want to be? Probably. So I think, I don't know, that's kind of where my head went with that was, are you making the people around you better people, like outside of their job description?
One thing going to people that I liked on the Pacey Performance podcast that Bradley sent us, the guest always said that, like, he had an idea in his mind of what a good practice would look like, I think, and like what he was envisioning would be successful. And then afterwards, he would finish the practice and check his own opinion on it. And then he would ask some coaches, he'd ask some players. So he'd get like objective feedback and check how he perceived the practice versus how others did. So he could actually see, like, how off am I in my thinking of how it went. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I think going off that, Kayvon, sometimes as coaches or player development staff, we get we get caught up in like trying to have like this perfect schedule and structure, and like this is what the week's going to look like, this is what the month should look like, this is what this player plan should look like. You know, when you said that, it made me think of Willie, when we were at SLU. Remember when we like got out the 3 machines and we just like threw them on home plate, and we like made it like a defensive, there's like 3 different types of machine, 3 different speeds, and it created like a game like environment. It was great, but like the reason we kept doing it was because the players liked it.
They loved
And
it.
not like, and that matters in the end. Like it was not in our plan moving. Like we just thought of it, so let's try it, and we veered off our original plan of how we did defense a little bit to create a different environment. But the big thing was the players liked it, and it goes back to what Villa said about like including the players when you make a decision on a practice design or a player plan. Like it's tough to get someone to like buy in and do something if they don't like it. Which like I think that's why player driven programs are always the most successful.
How do you navigate the fine line of the player enjoys this, so this is why we're going to do it, versus like me as a coach really believe that this is what you need, even though you may hate it, this is what you need?
So my wife's a school counselor with like super young kids, and like one thing I took away from her is like she always gives them options, so she knows 2 options work, right? But they got to pick one. So if they have the power to pick one, they're gonna basically feel like they like something more than something else. So I think that's a good, like we can do that in baseball 100%. There's not just one drill or one practice environment that's going to make them a big leaguer. There's probably a couple different avenues we can go down, give them the choice. And then that allows them to think like they were a part of it, like you said earlier, and that they chose something over something they didn't like.
That's super cool.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's a good idea, because like you could have 2 things that are like challenging for a guy.
I mean, I think about like when we're gonna clean our house, she's like, "You want to vacuum or like you want to fucking wipe down this area?" And I'm like, let me think. Which one do I hate more? Right? Like, choices are powerful.
That's a great point.
What else you got, Noah? Let's go,
That's
MC.
That's it.
I want to hear your thoughts.
So for the third question, I said like experiences. Like I think being able to connect to different people is extremely hard if you don't understand their background. Especially in the day, like there's so many diverse backgrounds people come from that like you can't just have this, hey, this is my experience, because it's really tough because someone else doesn't have the same experience. You have to find how to connect. So by finding, like Radley said, he did softball lessons, like that's great. That's a new experience. Like finding ways to be a leader in different contexts, in different cultures is, I think, the best way to develop those skills. And then obviously reflection, I think, is a huge one.
Do you guys think there's an environment we could all be in the off season that, like obviously a typical off season, I know this one could be different, but that helps us improve leadership or experiences?
We could all join the Marines.
I can't. I'm not an American citizen. Either are you.
I think like taking trips is really beneficial. Like one of my good friends works at Driveline, so I've taken a couple of trips up there, and I think that's cool. You always like pick up something. You know, taking some trips like to other different places, even outside of baseball. Like there's a CrossFit gym in my area that like I really love going to. Every time I go, like I learn something new, and it seems to like have some sort of relation to baseball. So yeah, like I love what Noah just said there. Like you can go find experiences in a ton of different ways. Like if you never put yourself out on the line, or like are kind of closed off to wanting to venture outside of baseball, like you're going to be limiting yourself.
No doubt.
Anyone else
Who's
have
it?
anything or questions?
Who's got the
I don't know, I
content
guess
next week? Oh,
I
sorry.
got one
Buns.
last comment would just be like, we have to be willing, and I know we've said it a lot, but we have to be willing to be uncomfortable too in order to grow. So like, we've talked about it a little bit, but like maybe volunteering to go down to the Dominican Academy or something like that just puts you in a space where you're uncomfortable, but like there's value there. It's not like you're just dreading something and nothing's coming out of it. Like the 2 weeks that I got to spend down there, like immensely helped me understand where those guys are coming from better. Just get a better take on one. It's just going to help, like in baseball specifically, learning Spanish is going to help. So anything like that is helpful, but just knowing that like, hey, I have to leave my comfort zone at some point if I want to get better, and being willing to do that.
Building off that, I think we talked about like pairing players in the cages, like one with better work ethic. But that goes into like a level of comfort as well. Like I would never want to go to the DR by myself. Like I'd be terrified. But going down with like one of you guys, I'd feel a lot more comfortable. Whereas like if I don't like, it gives you that sense of actual comfort where you can go out and branch out to farther and farther destinations. So finding the right people to go to be uncomfortable with is really important, I think.
Yeah, when I first went down, like, no way I could have gone by myself. But like I went down with like 2 people that had been down there a couple times, so it made me feel more comfortable. No, you wouldn't. I don't know if you'd survive Santo Domingo streets.
I don't think so.
Brother. This is a different atmosphere down there. Go and get a pack of gum in the convenience store, and it says it's like $2, and I go to pay for it, and they're like $5. I'm like, got it. Would have been $10 for you, Noah.
Oh yeah.
Who's doing the article next week? Buff or Buns or?
I can find one
Do you
and
have
post it in
anything
the
off? I
group.
can find some. I don't have anything off the top of my head, but
I don't have anything off the top of my head either, but I know I can find something because I think Bunce, you've done 2 already, right? Or
I've only done one.
okay, I've only
Either
done
one of you
too.
guys. It doesn't matter.
All right, I'll go ahead. I'll find something.
Okay.
I'll throw it in the group for next week.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Noah, thanks for joining.
Villa, you're welcome to
Yeah.
come on next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was really cool. This is quite the squad here. So
Sure.
appreciate you letting me in on it.
Do we we'll figure out a day too next week, depending on what goes on in the world of baseball.
Sweet.
Cool. All right, fellas.
All right.
All right.
See you guys.
See you,
All
boys.
right, great meeting
You
you all.
boys.
See ya.